Mike, by the way, what is your background? What did you do before you were this focused on marketing ops? And I know you do different stuff now as well. You're building this community. There's a lot of business elements to what you do. But in terms of marketing, what is your background actually?
My background is I came out of ad tech. Um, I got my very first sort of marketing oriented company from a publisher distribution network.
Hmm.
And so I was doing ad trafficking, coding ads to go onto our ad server and be distributed. And then I did a little bit of account management for running the paid ad strategy on behalf of clients. And then it really has been ever since then. It's been marketing automation. My next job right after that was to quote unquote figure out how to send a newsletter, like a monthly newsletter, and I joined a company to basically establish marketing automation and dove headfirst into inbound and the methodologies around creating content and capturing demand and routing
Hmm.
leads and the demand waterfall. I became a marketing operations manager right
Hmm.
after that. And then I did demand gen field marketing stuff. So I basically came in through um,
Hmm.
sort of just traditional digital marketing, demand gen, field marketing, marketing ops, that kind of stuff.
It was field marketing. I should know this probably.
Field marketing is like your conferences and your events and your
Hmm.
dinners and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I did a lot of that. I got us to and from the various sponsorship events that we were doing as a software company. So we were, getting a booth at Dreamforce or whatever other conference.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was establishing, oh gosh, everything from the booth itself, set up and tear down, to who's staffing it, when and what time, and what are they saying, what's the campaign objective, who's going to be in the audience, doing a debrief with the team about who's going to be there, what your hooks should be, where you should stand, how you engage people, what you should wear, what you shouldn't wear,
Hmm.
everything on the sort of field side. So
Yeah, I get you. I get you. Cool. I can use some of this in the course. So uh, now that you run a business and you do marketing ops, and a lot of the marketing for your business is done through the marketing operations lens, um, what what could you tell me about the adoption of the stuff you're able to set up by the content people or the SEO people? Like, what do you normally? Let me try and specify the question. Like, how easy or how hard is it usually to get a content team to understand your work and then use it well? For instance, when you set up a really good attribution report, what's your experience there?
mm,
And to look for more, challenges and stuff that I can speak to in the course, or gauge how much of a challenge it is or isn't for others.
yeah, I mean, in my experience, it's been really difficult to. Here, let me think about this. So, like, where my head goes as it relates to your question is, um, it's sort of like getting to the why of every effort, of any effort, not every effort, of any effort. Um, by way of example, a good friend of mine is interviewing for a role, and they've asked him to sort of do an exercise. And the exercise is one to say, how would you go about creating a segment of, top companies versus lower priority companies, setting up a nurture program? What would that look like? Every sort of all the details, all of the little like workflow processes. What tools would you use? What would you think about? How would you go about doing that? And it's a great question to ask for someone that's a marketing operations professional, to be able to establish a process to accomplish task of segmenting the audience and sending them a set of messages, enriching the data, and all those kinds of things. But what I encouraged him to do was to say, okay, I can do that, but what does success look like? Like, success for me as a marketing operations professional is accomplishing the thing that you asked me to do, which is segment the audience, automate some process, enrich the data, make sure it, goes through A to Z. But how are we actually measuring the effort? Is there a particular set of messages? Are we comparing group A to group B in terms of velocity and time to close? What other systems should I be aware of, or what other hypotheses should I be aware of that I can support our organization to better understand how this segmentation effort is going to impact the organization? And so if you think about like that same sort of line of thinking, to your comment earlier in terms of, hey, often SEO and the CRM, they don't communicate, right? Like the content teams aren't necessarily tapping into what's going on in the CRM from a content, notes taking perspective, all of those things. I think that's often missed, like the bigger picture. If everybody's aware of the hypothesis that is being pushed into the market from the content team, right? Like, hey, we are specifically producing this kind of content in an effort to capture these kinds of eyeballs. And we want to know how many of those kinds of eyeballs have actually converted into our database. That's something that a marketing operations professional could support. Right? We want eventually to the point of like measuring and then reporting. We want to be able to measure the hypothesis that we have, whatever it is, that the content that we're producing is doing X. We need to be able to measure that. And then we need to be able to report on, is it successful in doing Y? Whether it's capturing eyeballs or actually converting into revenue, we need to be able to measure those things versus just the top of funnel piece, right? Like, hey, we produced X amount of content, we're getting this amount of leads, all of those kinds of things. Most of the like initial line of thinking is it's there. The content team and the marketing team at large, like, are thinking in terms of the right direction, but by the time it gets to the end of the quarter, let's call it, where that maybe that hypothesis was meant to be measured and observed, I think a lot of it gets lost in the mix, right? Like we just stay focused on the eyeballs piece and not necessarily the bottom piece, and that does come down to attribution, right? Like I'm not saying that someone needs to look at a first touch or a last touch attribution model there, but I do think it needs to be like rounded out. And I think that's the hardest part about connecting sort of like these motions together. And a marketing operations professional needs to be able to step out of the weeds of, yes, I can help you measure, or like, yes, I can accomplish the task of automating and tagging and all that stuff, but in pursuit of what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think like content thinks a lot about, I'm pursuing a very specific thing. I think teams do a really good job of like thinking through that level of detail in terms of like producing the material that can help people find them and help them in general, right? Like you're really working, if you're a really good content production team on the SEO side or whatever, you're really thinking through like, how does this provide value to somebody in a way that is going to be consumed and ultimately, valued. But the measurement piece gets lost somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe the why is the common denominator. Maybe there's a shared language that can connect the teams and help them talk to each other better.